Welcome back to week 3 of Lindsay Unlearning, where I talk about my journey of unlearning the toxic thought patterns that we've been taught by society as I craft my own path to happiness. Like most people, when entering into polyamory, I felt safest in a primary relationship structure. It was the closest thing to monogamous experiences that I'd had in the past, and it felt like an easier transition, like baby steps. So when my partner said that he wanted to move into relationship anarchy, in which there is no primary relationship, I minorly freaked out. Okay, I majorly freaked out. Even though on paper relationship anarchy made sense to me, the ingrained mononormative thinking had me grasping for reassurance that I was the one or the best or the most important. And I was terrified of becoming less important to my partner. In the end, I realized that relationship anarchy is actually the style that makes the most sense to me as well. And in this video, I will talk about my journey going from partnered to relationship anarchy and why ripping off the Band-Aid was the best thing that could have possibly happened to me, even though it hurt like hell. Before we dive in, I wanted to give a quick overview for those who aren't familiar of the difference between a partnered hierarchical structure and a solo polyamorous non-hierarchical structure. First, in a partnered hierarchical structure, there is a couple who's considered the primary partners. Each of them has other secondary partners. They might even share a secondary partner. But the idea is that all of these secondary partners are exactly that, secondary. The primary partner has authority over their other partners' relationships in the sense that the two primary partners set guidelines within their relationship of what is allowed and what isn't. Also, this is typically the only person who is going to be meeting family, living together, having kids, things like that. The rest are secondary relationships, and they're usually, to some degree, considered less important. On the other hand, you have a solo or non-hierarchical structure where individuals date individuals who date other individuals, and no one has authority over any other relationship. All of these relationships are considered hierarchically equal, even if they're at different levels of depth. Maybe you have someone who you just met and you're still getting to know, and you have another partner who you've been with for a year. This partner who you've been with for a year doesn't have any say or seniority over this new relationship just because they've been with you longer. You're relating to everyone independently, and no one is your main or most important partner. And before people come for me in the comments, yes, that is a simplified explanation, but it would take hours to get into the nuance of it all. So that gives you a general understanding if it wasn't a concept you were familiar with before. Cool. So now that we have that basic understanding, let's dive in. My story starts similarly to many polyamorous people with opening an existing relationship that was built on a monogamous foundation. In my case, I had been building a connection with someone for a couple of months, and though we had both touched on us not having exactly traditional views on relationships, it was never in a way that implied that our relationship was headed in a non-traditional direction. After a couple of months of falling hard, I felt myself needing some kind of validation of our relationship. Like, I needed people to know that he was mine. However, while I was grappling with that, he was coming to terms with the fact that he was polyamorous and trying to figure out what that meant for our relationship. What he didn't know is that I had identified with polyamory for close to a decade, but just never had a partner who wanted to explore it with me. So when he brought it up to me, I was game. I was like, cool, he's gonna be my boyfriend, and then we're gonna be able to see people outside of that, but like, I'm gonna be the most important still. And it kind of started that way. We talked about what we should tell each other about other people we met and what was allowed and what wasn't. We had check-ins on how we were both feeling as we were processing through things, like all those things that you do when you're first opening up a relationship. But as he started connecting with other people, I started to spiral. And this is so common when people open up relationships because all of your insecurities come to the surface. And you have to do so much work at one, managing those insecurities, and two, dismantling the mononormative thought processes like jealousy and comparison and ownership. He's mine. It's so easy to look at the things that their other partners bring to the table and start comparing yourself or feeling less than because you're forgetting about all the things that you bring to the table. And that's part of the beauty of polyamory, right? Like, you don't have to check every single box for your partner and vice versa. So while I was trying to play catch up on dismantling 30 years of thinking, my partner was having his own dilemma of knowing that he wanted to shift to a relationship anarchy style from our current kind of primary partnership, but also knowing that telling me that would send me further into this spiral that I was already in. During this stage, it felt like every day I was having a new breakdown because there were so many things to process. And every time I felt like, okay, made it through that, I can take a breath, it felt like the finish line was pushed back another 10 yards and I had another thing I had to like be comfortable with or process. At the time, it felt like we were on a fast track, but I actually feel like it's probably pretty similar for a lot of other couples because things don't happen until they happen. And you can do as much research as you want beforehand, but you don't know how your mind and your body and your heart are going to respond when you're actually put into those situations. So when things happen, they happen quickly and they happen with really big feelings. And I can attest that pushing through to the other side of this stage is really hard. When we were in the thick of this stage of work, it almost broke me. It was so much, so fast. And I was like, why am I putting myself through this? This hurts so much. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm better within monogamy. I was lucky that I had a partner who was such a safe space for me, and he spent hours listening to me process through my emotions, and also at the same time didn't just tell me what I wanted to hear. He told me the truth, even if it was hard and even if it hurt both of us. Throughout practicing polyamory, but especially during the early stages, there are three really important things that you need to have as a couple. One, you need to be really comfortable with an uncomfortable level of radical honesty, both giving and receiving about what you want. You cannot just tell your partner what they want to hear because you're afraid of hurting them. It's only going to backfire down the road. Two, both sides have to be completely dedicated to unlearning the ingrained ways of thinking about relationships. If you try to exist within polyamory while applying mononormative thought processes, you are just setting yourself up for failure. Three, and this might be the most important of them all, both sides need to show an obscene amount of love and care for each other while you're both processing all of this. Beginning of this video, I mentioned that this is about my journey from partnered to solo poly. So what happened? My partner and I decided that we'd be better off moving forward as friends instead of in a romantic partnership. And I won't get into the details for the sake of privacy, but I will say because we followed the three kind of rules I outlined before, we were able to maintain a really amazing friendship coming out of it that still sustains to this day. And then I started dating as a solo poly person, and things were so much easier and everything started to make sense. I realized that being in a primary partnered relationship triggered all of the same anxious attachment and insecurity that I felt in monogamous relationships in the past. But when building relationships on a foundation of non-hierarchy, I don't have that. And it's not that these relationships are less serious or less deep or less important. It's just that they're built on a different foundation, one where you're not expected to be everything for your partner, and your partner isn't expected to be everything for you. You're allowed to connect on the things that you connect on and not connect on the things that you don't. And this foundation for me eliminates so much of that comparison and jealousy that I feel within a primary relationship structure. And per usual, Mowgli has joined us. If I hadn't been given the very excruciating gift of my partner ripping off the primary relationship bandage, I don't know how long it would have taken me to get here, or if I ever would have at all. While it was brutal, it also forced me to deal with some really tough emotions and learnings that I probably wouldn't have pushed through otherwise. In a lot of ways, it was a boot camp for personal growth and unlearning. And I came out at the end with the skills that I needed to be successful within polyamory. And those are skills that I did not have coming into it. So if you are in these early stages of polyamory and you're feeling defeated or like you've made a terrible mistake, just know that on the other side of that discomfort is peace and security and calm. And if you dedicate yourself to pushing through that discomfort, you will come out on that other side. Thank you for joining me for week 3 of Lindsay Unlearning. I'd love to see you back here next week when I talk about the advice that I would give to couples who are looking to open up their relationship. So if that sounds interesting to you, then hit that subscribe button. And as always, like this video if you found this content helpful.